The scent of chlorine and cheap pizza grease hung heavy in the humid air of the Spring Creek High School gymnasium. The Family Achievement Night. Banners fluttering limply under the buzzing fluorescent lights, as my entire world shattered into a million irreparable pieces, not with a scream, but with my own sister's saccharine, sweet, perfectly projected voice over the crackling PA system. "I just want to thank my mom and dad," Lily chirped, clutching her valedictorian medal and her full ride scholarship offer to Stanford, her smile a blinding white slash of triumph as she stood center court, for always believing in me, for seeing my potential, and for understanding that to nurture one star, sometimes you have to make sacrifices elsewhere in the family ecosystem. The crowd of neighbors, teachers, and classmates from our small Colorado town chuckled politely, thinking it a quirky metaphor. But I felt each word like a physical blow, standing off to the side in my slightly too big, borrowed dress, my own acceptance letter to a state college's paralegal program, earned with my own grades, my own after-school job, crumpled and forgotten in my father's jacket pocket after he'd glanced at it and said, "We'll talk about this later, Maya, don't ruin Lily's night." The sacrifice, of course, was me. My mother, beaming at Lily's side, then turned her gaze on me, and in a voice that carried across the silent gym, said, "It's true. Maya, sweetheart, we love you. But you have to understand. Lily has a real future, a brilliant mind. We've had to invest everything, time, money, hope, into her. Your ambitions, while cute, are just not realistic. You'll never sit at the table with real professionals. You'll never understand the weight of a real career. And you'll certainly never wear a badge or a title that demands the respect Lily's will. It's better you learn that now." The heat of 1,000 eyes scorched my skin. I saw my biology teacher look down, ashamed. I saw my childhood friend, Jess, mouth, "I'm so sorry." I saw my father nod in solemn agreement, his arm around Lily. A closed circle from which I was eternally excluded. The tears that came weren't the quiet, pretty kind Lily produced on cue. They were a torrent of utter humiliation and grief. My chest heaving with silent, ragged sobs I couldn't control, my vision swimming as I stumbled back from the crowd, my heel catching on the gym floor mat. A final, clumsy failure in front of everyone, the soundtrack to my exit, the muffled whispers and the resuming, celebratory applause for the golden child. I didn't wait for the end of the ceremony. I ran through the double doors, the cool Colorado night air, doing nothing to cool the furnace of shame in my veins, and I kept running, past the football field, past the town limits sign, all the way to the Greyhound station on the highway, where I bought a one-way ticket to the farthest place my remaining cash could take me, Seattle, with a single duffel bag and a heart that had turned from broken glass into cold, hard flint. The journey was a blur of changing landscapes and deepening resolve. The rhythmic thrum of the bus wheels a mantra: never enough, never enough, never enough. Seattle was a baptism by drizzle and indifference, a city of towering evergreens, and even taller glass buildings that reflected a sky the color of bruised pewter, a city where no one knew I was the sacrificial lamb of Spring Creek. I found a bed in a women's shelter for the first 2 weeks. My days a frantic scramble for survival, a job washing dishes in the steamy, punishing heat of a Pike Place market seafood restaurant. The smell of fish and bleach permeating my clothes and hair, my hands raw and pruned, followed by a night shift as a cleaner in a downtown office tower, vacuuming acres of silent, plush carpet under the ghostly glow of computer screensavers. My world reduced to the whir of machinery, and the hollow ache in my stomach. I slept in fitful bursts on a bottom bunk in a shared room, the sounds of other women's snores and sobs a strange lullaby. My dreams haunted by my mother's voice and the echo of applause in a high school gym. The loneliness was a physical presence, a cold companion in the damp Seattle nights as I walked home. My shoulders hunched against the rain, watching couples and families laughing in warm, glowing restaurants. The feeling of being an alien on a planet where I didn't understand the rules of belonging. I cried, of course, silent tears into my thin pillow, tears of exhaustion, of fear, of a grief so profound it felt like I was mourning my own death. But each morning, I wiped my face, looked in the small, cracked mirror in the shared bathroom, and repeated my new, silent vows. I will sit at the table. I will wear the badge. They will see. It wasn't shouted. It was etched into my bones. A quiet blueprint for a life they said I couldn't build. My revenge would be a masterpiece of patience, not a burst of violence. The first brick was education, seized with desperate hands. I enrolled in free night classes at Seattle Central College to improve my typing and business software skills, spending my precious days off in the public library, devouring books on American law, civics, and government structure. The dry text a soothing balm, a system of order and justice that appealed to my soul, craving the clarity and rules my family had never provided. A breakthrough came when I landed a job as a mail clerk and front desk receptionist at a small, struggling immigration law firm in the International District. The pay was minimal, but it was clean, quiet work. And I was surrounded by law books and the murmured, urgent conversations about visas, asylum, and citizenship, the very architecture of American belonging. I listened, I learned. I made myself indispensable, staying late to organize files, learning the basics of legal forms. My boss, a kind but overworked attorney named Mr. Chen, noticing my diligence. "You have a meticulous mind, Maya," he said one late evening, finding me cross-referencing a complex case file. "Ever think of becoming a paralegal? Or more? That, or more," hung in the air, a seed taking root. With Mr. Chen's hesitant but genuine recommendation, and my own relentless study, I was accepted into an accredited online paralegal studies program. My life becoming a grueling trinity of work, study, and sleep, financed by ramen noodles, second-hand clothes, and a furnace, like determination. I earned my certificate with distinction, and Mr. Chen promoted me to a paralegal assistant. My world expanding from mail to legal research, to drafting preliminary documents, to sitting in on client meetings. My first time, at the table. Even if it was a chipped Formica one in a modest office. The work fed me, not just financially, but spiritually. I was helping people navigate the complex, often terrifying, machinery of American law, securing their futures, their safety, their place in this country. I found I had a talent for the intricate detail of regulatory compliance and administrative law, a dry field many found tedious. But to me, it was a puzzle where every piece had to fit perfectly. A system where diligence trumped drama. I began to research the civil service system, the pathways into the federal government, my goal crystallizing not just any job, but a position of public trust, a role with a badge and a title that carried the weight of the United States itself. The path was long and paved with competitive exams. I studied for the civil service exam on my lunch breaks, highlighting manuals on government procedure and ethics, my focus so intense the chaotic sounds of the city outside faded away. I passed with a high score, and after a year of applications, interviews, and a grueling background check that dug into the family history I had tried to leave behind, I received the life-altering letter. I was offered the position of a compliance investigator trainee with the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Office of Inspector General. In their regional office in San Francisco, it was an entry-level position, but it was federal. It was a uniformed service, and it came with a badge and a credential that identified me as a federal agent. The move to San Francisco was another rebirth. I rented a small studio with a view of a tiny sliver of the bay. Bought a single, good quality navy blue blazer for my first day, and stood before the mirror, pinning the badge to my lapel. The woman who looked back was older, her eyes holding a calm depth that hadn't been there before. The ghost of the humiliated girl from Colorado still present, but no longer in control. The training was rigorous, focused on investigating fraud, waste, and abuse in federal healthcare programs, a complex world of Medicare regulations, hospital audits, and pharmaceutical compliance. I thrived. The same meticulousness that made me a good paralegal made me an exceptional investigator. I could trace a fraudulent billing scheme through a labyrinth of paperwork. I had the patience for long-term, detailed audits, and I discovered a fierce sense of justice for the vulnerable populations, the elderly, the disabled, the poor, who were victimized by the schemes I uncovered. I earned the respect of my colleagues and supervisors, my reputation as a quiet, thorough, and unshakably ethical agent growing with each closed case. Years passed in a blur of purposeful work. I earned promotions, moving from trainee to investigator to senior analyst. My expertise sought after, my authority in my specific domain quietly recognized. I built a life of serene, satisfying solitude, my small apartment filled with books and plants, my weekends spent hiking the Marin headlands, my friendships with a small circle of colleagues, based on mutual professional respect. I never spoke of my family, my past was a closed book. The revenge, when it began, was not an act of mine, but a simple, inevitable function of my duty, a cosmic irony so perfect it felt scripted. A major, multi-state investigation I was leading into a network of fraudulent hospice care providers, a scheme that preyed on the terminally ill for Medicare dollars, led our forensic accounting team to a web of shell companies and illicit kickbacks. One of the smaller, but significant, financial conduits was a healthcare compliance consultancy based in Denver, Colorado. The named principals on the incorporation documents were my father, Robert Miller, and my sister, Dr. Lily Miller, Wright, now a rising star in hospital administration at a prestigious Denver medical center. My breath didn't hitch, my hand didn't shake. A profound, icy calm settled over me as I reviewed the file in my San Francisco office. The evidence was clear. Their consultancy likely started with my father's savings, and Lily's medical credibility had been accepting regular, disguised payments from our primary fraud target in exchange for providing falsified compliance certifications to the fraudulent hospice entities. They had sold their ethics, my father's business acumen and Lily's hard-won medical reputation, for a slice of dirty money. Following strict federal protocol, I immediately declared a conflict of interest and recused myself from any direct involvement in that branch of the investigation. My superior, a stern woman named Deputy Assistant Inspector General Vance, reviewed my disclosure and the evidence. "This is a serious conflict, Agent Miller," she said, her eyes sharp. "But the evidence stands on its own. The case will proceed through the proper channels. Your integrity in disclosing this is noted." The federal machine, impartial and relentless, took over. Subpoenas were issued. Forensic accountants descended on their consultancy. The case was airtight, built on digital trails and financial records, not a daughter's grievance. I imagined the scene in their upscale Denver neighborhood: the shock, the panic, the frantic calls to high-priced lawyers who would deliver the grim news about federal felony charges, prison time, the utter destruction of Lily's medical career, and my father's reputation. I did nothing to intervene. I simply continued my work on other cases, my conscience clear, my duty fulfilled. The final, public act of my revenge was orchestrated by fate, not by me. As a senior official with a record of successful, complex prosecutions, I was required to testify before a congressional subcommittee in Washington, D.C., on systemic vulnerabilities in hospice care oversight. It was a public hearing, televised on C-SPAN, and covered by major news outlets. I wore my most authoritative federal agent attire, a tailored dark suit, my official badge prominently displayed on my belt, my demeanor one of calm, commanding expertise. As I sat at the witness table, under the bright lights and facing the panel of lawmakers, delivering my detailed, technical testimony with clarity and confidence, my eyes briefly scanned the public gallery out of habit. And there they were. My father, aged and shrunken, sitting between two grim-faced lawyers. My mother, her face pale and drawn, clutching a handkerchief. And Lily, her once proud posture collapsed in on itself, her eyes wide with a kind of terrified recognition. They were there because their lawyers had likely advised them to observe the proceedings, to understand the federal machinery that was now grinding their lives to dust. My mother's eyes met mine across the crowded, formal room. In her gaze, I saw the staggering, vertiginous collapse of her entire reality. She saw not the daughter she deemed a hopeless sacrifice, but Special Agent Maya Miller, a credentialed expert speaking with authority to the United States Congress, her name and title displayed on the official placard before me, her words transcribed into the permanent congressional record. The woman she said would never sit at the table, never wear a badge of respect, was doing precisely that at the highest level imaginable. My mother's face crumpled. A low, choked gasp escaped her, audible in a quiet moment of the hearing. She brought the handkerchief to her mouth, her shoulders shaking with uncontrollable, silent sobs, her entire body convulsing with the weight of her mistake, her betrayal, her catastrophic misjudgment. My father stared, his jaw slack, his eyes moving from my face to the congressional seal behind me, finally understanding the magnitude of what they had lost. Not just their freedom and reputation, but the daughter whose quiet strength they had mistaken for weakness. Lily simply looked down at her hands. The valedictorian's medal, now a worthless trinket against the federal indictments she faced. I held their gaze for only a second longer, my expression one of cool, professional detachment. Then I turned back to the senator who had asked me a question. To answer your question, Senator, I continued, my voice steady and clear, echoing in the silent, electrified room. The vulnerabilities are systemic, but the enforcement is unwavering. No one, regardless of their position or perceived prestige, is above the law. I finished my testimony, gathered my papers, and stood. As I walked out of the hearing chamber, flanked by colleagues, the whispers in the gallery swelling behind me, I felt no surge of hot triumph, only a profound, quiet finality. The revenge was complete. They had believed her lies, invested in a false idol, and in doing so, they had exposed the corruption in their own hearts. My victory was not in their downfall, but in my unwavering rise. I had built a life of integrity, purpose, and quiet authority on the very ashes of their doubt, and in the end, the most powerful exposure was not of their crimes to the world, but of my own unshakable worth to myself, forged in silent strength and cemented with the dignified patience of a woman who finally, and forever, knew her own power.